Like, to me, there's one level of the work that is designing at Louis. But my real job is to make sure that there's like 6 young black kids that take my job after me. What I would be more impressed by is the next candidate for a house that gets hired as the next head designer has this like multidisciplinary background, comes from, you know, not a fashion school, like thinks in a different dimension, and him get a shot.
So on Valentine's Day this year, the 14th of February, Pharrell Williams was announced as the successor to the late Virgil Abloh as the new creative director of Louis Vuitton. And this sparked a lot of controversy online regarding the place of celebrity and design in the luxury fashion house space. So stay and watch in full if you want to understand how Pharrell got this role of creative director at Louis Vuitton. Okay, so the first part of this video will be an in-depth explanation of the backlash and criticism that Pharrell and Louis Vuitton have been getting for this decision. And then the second part will be looking in-depth at how Pharrell got the role of creative director at Louis Vuitton and the things he did to be put in that position. I've added the YouTube chapter timestamps to the video, so if you're more interested in one part over another, you can just jump to the part you're more interested in. However, I do recommend that you watch the whole thing to have a more complete understanding of it all. Now, Pharrell needs little introduction. He is an American producer, artist and songwriter who has also for many decades been a frequent collaborator in the fashion space. Now, many see Pharrell as an icon in culture, and he's been long-time close friends with many people, including the late Virgil Abloh, as well as plenty of other designers who helm prominent roles at luxury houses in Paris, such as Nigo, who is currently the creative director of Kenzo, Kim Jones, the current creative director of Dior and previously Louis Vuitton, Matthew Williams, the creative director of Givenchy, and even Tremaine Emery, the creative director of Supreme. So I've seen a lot of back and forth on Twitter about what people feel is a very controversial decision appointing Pharrell Williams as the creative director of Louis Vuitton. They feel like he doesn't have the proper credentials for the role and see it as another millionaire celebrity stealing jobs from the fully fledged fashion designers who deserve it and have formerly studied fashion design. So let's begin by explaining what they mean by that, but also highlighting why it isn't really a valid point of criticism in modern day fashion. And I think that's generally because there's a lot of confusion around the role of creative director. So traditionally, for say the last 50 years in fashion, the creative director role stood more as a head designer role. Not only were you there sewing and designing the garments yourself, you would also choose the artistic direction of the collections, and you had a whole bunch of designers working under you who would assist you in achieving your goal. If you are a creative director, you're an extremely skilled fashion designer, both on an artistic level and a technical level. And this is the part of Pharrell's resume that people feel like he's not qualified for the role. They're comparing him to designers like Yves Saint Laurent, Christobel Balenciaga, Lee Alexander McQueen, where if you gave these people unlimited time, they could not only design, but sew and create all of the garments themselves from start to finish for an entire collection. On top of their very creative minds, they understood pattern making, drapery, tailoring, they could sew, and so on and so forth. They really didn't have to have additional help if they didn't want it. Traditionally, anyone who held this creative director role had formerly studied fashion design at a prestigious fashion school and had worked under other designers for many years or even decades before being appointed the creative director role. Then, when the creative director of a house would leave for whatever reason, normally their second in command or someone from their design team would be promoted up to the new creative director role. This is something that even happens in present day, as we saw with Bottega Veneta, and once Daniel Lee left, Matthieu Blazy was then promoted. These are the people that critics feel like Pharrell is stealing his job from. However, when it comes to the term creative director, fashion has changed a lot. A lot of the previous standards were mainly due to the financial state of luxury at the time. Brands weren't doing tens of billions in revenue like they are today and churning out collections. Before the early 2000s, luxury fashion was very niche, and it was not nearly as focused as it is today on the commerce and sale of goods. For context, brands like Gucci were literally struggling so much and weren't making enough money to operate that they were going to shut down because they'd gone bust. So when you take things like that into account, the cost to have a really big design team was a lot more of a struggle back then, and brands might only have a small number of designers working on collections. This meant it was a lot more imperative for your creative director to have a lot of the technical skills as well, because it's already a pretty small team. So the creative director being able to do things themselves just makes everything a lot more efficient and streamlined. However, this all completely changed when conglomerates like Gucci Group and LVMH entered the scene and started acquiring these luxury fashion houses. Previously dying brands were suddenly filled with investment and backing of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. So they could suddenly afford to expand the designers in their atelier like 3 or 4 times, spend loads of money on marketing, purchase their fabric suppliers for vertical integration. The whole operation in an atelier and in a luxury fashion house suddenly became a lot more streamlined and efficient. But these conglomerates wanted to really significantly improve on their profits every year and really recoup on their investment. So they started doing things like gradually upping the prices of goods, increasing the number of collections that brands would show every year. Many brands that went from showing maybe 2 to 4 collections a year, in today's climate show about 10 collections a year and release 10 collections a year. So the work rate of the designers also had to go up, sometimes 5-fold, which is why these design teams were suddenly being expanded by 3 or 4 times the size they were previously. This process of conglomerates acquiring luxury fashion houses really is what sculpted the state of modern day luxury today and what that looks like in fashion. And so you get an idea of how big this kind of changed everything. Louis Vuitton went from being a company that did around 3 billion in revenue in 1990 to doing 20 billion in revenue in 2022. So almost 10 times bigger than they were before. So jumping back into present day, with all this financial backing from conglomerates that fashion houses have, and there being such a big shift in how we consume as consumers, I think the previous understanding of creative director has started to become obsolete. If I'm at an atelier with say 100 designers working under me, in terms of efficiency, it makes very little difference if I'm able to do some of the technical skills that they are, since there are just so many of them. And you have to understand, these aren't just 100 random designers off the street. These are some of the best tailors, pattern cutters, sewers in the entire industry that have been handpicked or applied to work at that atelier at, say, Louis Vuitton. So it doesn't really make as much of a difference as it used to if I'm able to do a lot of those skills myself. Over time, creative director has focused more into taking the title quite literally. The creative director uses their imagination to create their own vision and direction for the brand, and it's their job to help execute that. You have your 100 designers underneath you who help you bring your ideas to real life and bring them into the real world. This modern model gives creative directors more time to focus on the creative aspect of the role. And this isn't all to say that creative directors shouldn't have a design background or that it's not necessary anymore. But it's just that with the financial backing that LVMH or Gucci and all these fashion brands provide now, it's not as necessary to have a fashion background as it used to be. So I think after clarifying that, it's fair to say that Pharrell didn't necessarily steal the job from formally trained fashion designers, but more that the job was simply open to anyone who has proven that they can affect their creative vision in the fashion space, and that happened to be Pharrell. If Pharrell had been appointed, say, the head designer of knitwear at Louis Vuitton, then it would be a lot more of a problem, because that is a role that requires formal fashion design studying. What's also odd is the creative direction role is a very niche role. I mean, hundreds, if not thousands of people study fashion design every year, and a creative direction role at a luxury house opens up once every few years. It's not like tons of people are offered the role. I mean, a creative director can last anywhere from 2 to 20 years before the role then opens up again. So I'm not really sure why people framed it like, oh, all these people in fashion aren't going to get a job now because Pharrell has taken their job, which I find quite funny. But ultimately, there are hundreds of different roles and variations of roles within fashion. So I don't really understand why the criticism on places like Twitter made it seem as if creative director was the only job available to people. So now we can segue into why specifically Pharrell was picked for this job. We've established that the creative direction role in fashion is ultimately about creating a world with your imagination and effectively communicating it with your audience so they can connect with your world and ultimately buy your clothes. Pharrell has a very rich history in both fashion and music where he's proven time and time again that this is something he can do, and ultimately LVMH spotted that. But if we take the art form of music, Pharrell is considered to be one of, if not the greatest producer of all time. He's someone that, if your favorite artist hasn't already worked with him, they likely want to work with him. And if they have already worked with him, they want to work with him again. A great song or album normally creates a world for listeners. And what makes that song or album chart is the fact that that world has connected so deeply with a large audience base. These skills of effectively building a world and communicating it well with an audience are skills that Pharrell has developed over the last 3 decades. And I'm sure LVMH see it that if he's able to reproduce that and apply it to a fashion space, he'll be able to engineer an Louis Vuitton that really connects and resonates with a lot of consumers. This idea and concept of communicating with audiences and the youth through world building and community is something that was really the crux of Virgil's Louis Vuitton, which was obviously very successful for them. But let's pivot specifically to his history in fashion. Pharrell has already had several periods where he's shown that he can apply his creative mind to the fashion space and really affect the culture of an entire generation. And I imagine that this is largely what landed him his role at LV. Of the success of his name and his brand, Billionaire Boys Club, which we'll talk about in a second, Pharrell landed his first collaboration with Louis Vuitton in 2004. Marc Jacobs, the creative director of the time, enlisted Pharrell and his best friend and mentor, Nigo, to work on some eyewear for the brand. This resulted in the original Louis Vuitton Millionaires. They were initially limited to just 200 pieces per colour, but were so successful that the brand had to do a wider re-release for them in 2008. These original Millionaires then birthed the Millionaires that I'm sure you're all more familiar with. Once at the luxury house, for his first collection, Virgil then reinterpreted the collaboration of his old-time friends Nigo and Pharrell, and reinterpreted the designs into what he called the 1.1 Millionaires. They were totally and directly inspired from the ones Pharrell and Nigo did. These quickly went on to become one of the most successful eyewear accessories at the house under V's tenure. I think this really proved to the brand that he was capable of designing and innovating really great sellable accessories. And accessories are one of the main streams of revenue at a brand like Louis Vuitton, so it seemed like a no-brainer to them. It also showed that Marc Jacobs, the designer who arguably brought LV to the fame that they have today, really believed in Pharrell and gave him his blessing. Now, the 2008 re-release of the Millionaire eyewear was also alongside a jewelry collaboration that Pharrell did with LV. This was a very successful collaboration, and I think once again it just allowed the brand to see how he operates and works, and they knew that they'd be able to work with him in the future if they wanted to. Now on to Pharrell's brands. Billionaire Boys Club, Ice Cream, and Human Race. Judging from what I saw on Twitter, it seems like a lot of people didn't even realise Pharrell had had fashion brands in the past, which I found quite interesting. BBC was founded by Pharrell alongside Nigo in 2003 and lived in a similar era of the height of fame of streetwear labels like Bape. BBC is easily one of the most successful street fashion brands of all time and is still a massive behemoth even today in this space. It's difficult to really explain the chokehold that Nigo and Pharrell had hip-hop culture and youth culture in at this time and era. Those people really gravitated to the brand and communicated well with the brand. Pharrell deeply understood and analysed the Japanese view of American hip-hop culture and repackaged it in a way that really resonated with Americans, understanding that even the concept of the clothes being entirely produced in Japan and exported over to the US would really add to the allure for them. This really affected how an entire subculture of youth were dressing at the time. Really similar actually to how Virgil did with his Off-White label in the 2015-16 era. I think looking back on the BBC era was enough for LVMH to really see and understand the power that Pharrell wields when it comes to this communication with audience and through clothes and branding. I think this picture of Karl Lagerfeld, creative director of Fendi and Chanel at the time, wearing BBC in an issue of Harper's Bazaar in 2008, really emphasizes the size and scale of this world Pharrell had created. Karl Lagerfeld is one of the greats in fashion, and for him to even acknowledge the brand in any way, shape or form, I think really shows the strides that Pharrell had made. Now that instance of Karl wearing BBC would be the beginning of a series of moments that culminated with Pharrell developing a very close relationship with Chanel and Karl Lagerfeld. Pharrell had a lot of love for Chanel, sometimes customizing the double C logo onto his own personal garments. Karl eventually caught wind of this, and Pharrell became an ambassador for the brand, being handpicked by Karl for a short film for Chanel in 2014, as well as featuring as the first male model in many handbag campaigns for the brand. This relationship led to several collaborations with the luxury house, with him eventually launching an entire Pharrell x Chanel capsule in 2019. Pharrell worked alongside Karl and his design team in order to produce this collection, and it's just another instance that he can add to his resume of being able to go into these luxury houses and have experience working with them as a producer rather than just a consumer. But one of the most memorable collaborations with Chanel and Pharrell would be when Adidas, Chanel and Pharrell all teamed up on the Chanel NMDs. These were part of Pharrell's long-standing relationship with Adidas, and came shortly after he had released his Human Race Adidas collaboration NMDs the year prior. The Chanel ones literally go for thousands of pounds now, and when I tell you they had the entire sneaker community, streetwear community, even some of the Chanel fans were all in a chokehold by these shoes. They were released at the infamous Colette store, RIP, and they came at a time that made it very difficult to say that Nike were on top of Adidas. Now, Pharrell has had so many more powerful cultural moments and collaborations that I could go into, but I think there are two that really solidified the LV role for him. I believe Pharrell's work with Chanel and his long-standing tastemaker talents really helped him display his deep understanding of luxury. This, and his clear ability to creatively communicate with so many different audiences, really caught the eyes of many brands in the luxury space. In 2021, Pharrell went on to partner with Richard Mille on his own watch, which featured design motifs he had been using throughout his whole career, the astronaut, space and Mars. These had been big selling points for him even during his BBC days. Now, a lot of people may think that Richard Mille watches are ugly or Pharrell's collaboration with them was ugly, but that doesn't really change the fact that within the watch and timepiece space, that brand is the epitome of luxury. Previously, they'd only really collaborated with Formula One team drivers and tennis players, and Pharrell was actually the first musical artist they collaborated with at all. This watch retailed at $1 million US. $1 million. Richard Mille could see that Pharrell's ability to communicate was not just with the youth, but also with a demographic whose love and understanding of luxury could have them spending $1 million on a watch. Just a year later, at Nigo's debut show for Kenzo, it was revealed that Pharrell was working on an ongoing partnership with Tiffany. Since then, he has been regularly seen wearing his first design from that partnership. Almond-shaped glasses rimmed in diamonds, with emeralds encrusted on either side of the temple. Again, I imagine that that's something that will retail at a figure that's not meant for me or anyone else watching this video. I'm really trying to drill home the point that time and time again, Pharrell has shown that his taste level and ability to execute his ideas, even in the luxury space, far exceeds any other rapper or celebrity. Pharrell's resume shows that he not just has access, but a deep understanding of a wide range of audiences. When you pair this with his great creative vision, I believe Louis Vuitton trusts that Pharrell will be able to communicate really well through the collections and deliver an innovative yet sellable touch to the brand. I think a great point to note as well is that you don't get the creative director role as soon as these brands approach you. They kind of undergo an interview process with a lot of designers where you have to pitch your idea and direction for the brand to them. If that works with where they want to take the brand, then you'll get the role. Rumours say that this is where Martine Rose and other designers may have fell short, as LV may not have liked the direction they wanted to take the brand in. So it's a good sign that Pharrell passed these, as I imagine they wanted a healthy evolution for the community culture that Virgil created there. With Pharrell already having ties to LVMH through his work at LV and Tiffany's, and his creative ethos being a great successor to Virgil Abloh's, I completely understand why LV decided to place their chips on Pharrell. But thank you so much for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, please like, please subscribe, and comment your thoughts on the whole situation. I am quite curious to read opposing viewpoints or people that agree with me or whatever, and just see that kind of discourse in the comments. If you want to see a video about shopping in London, particularly at the Celine store, click here. But otherwise, have a lovely day and see you next time.